Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. How you doing? All right. Well, first of all, I'm Doug, in case we haven't met, and this is Doppler'S Gear Garage, and gosh darn it, it's Saturday morning. I guess in New York it's Saturday afternoon, but... And in Germany, it might be Saturday night. In any case, I had all this amazing stuff kind of set up and was kind of getting all this stuff in the back. And so the short version, if you're running multiple programs and then trying to get them to come out a common pipeline when you're streaming, it doesn't always do exactly what you want to do. So I found a slight workaround that's going to allow me to play and mute the mic. Sorry, and still have audio pass through with the track, but yours truly doesn't get to play with delay. The other thing is we get a chance to answer your questions as always. First of all, it's always a privilege and a pleasure to be here on a Saturday with you. Chris, look at you. You're adored, but you know that. I've got to figure out how to make these come through. Ah, there we go. Hang on. I guess we figured out. No, that does not do anything to scale that. How about that? There we go. Does that mean the next one's going to scale through? There we go. Sonia, speaking of Germany, guten Nacht? How do you say that? Guten Tag? How you doing? Great to see you. Hello, hello, hello. Danny Douglas, I take it you got my email. Thank you so much. Oh, right. So if I'm not careful, Nandini was pointing out that when I'm rocking... So that's, unfortunately, my knee against the keyboard tray. I get a little excited. It's like, whoa, hey, it's an earthquake. All right. Dennis, hey, what's going on, my man? Great to see you. All right. So, first of all, we got a bunch of things we're going to be doing. I have been in a Rectifier project deep dive, and so it means I've been spending a lot of time recording and putting together music. And one of the things that we're going to be talking about here more is kind of, you know, the tools of the trade. And that means that for those of us that are recording, and by the way, one of the smart things to do is always take, if you will, the temperature of the room. I would love to know, of the folks that are kindly here, how many of you are actively recording, and those of you that are actively recording, what are some of the challenges that you have come across recently or recurrently that you're like, gosh darn it, I've got this challenge, I don't know how to fix it, and or any questions, and that opens up for anything at all. But the idea is, being Doppler'S Gear Garage and being the fact that I'm kind of gone down this deep dive around recording gear and kind of capturing stuff and getting it in there so it can go out there, is a place where I'm living, and there's so many nuances to this. And each time I do this, and sometimes I'll go and buy a new product, and I go to use some sort of contact-based drum plug-in, and quite often the documentation is not great. And if I didn't know some of the stuff that I know, I'd be like, how in the world do you navigate this stuff? So if you're having stuff that you're having a problem navigating, I may not be able to have the answer, but I can certainly try and help. But one of the other things is, being Doppler'S Gear Garage, there are a couple of pieces of gear that I'm going to call out in this particular moment that I'm excited about. This is my Cab Clone IR Plus. And if I mute my vocal mic, and remember to turn it back on, I do not have the pleasure of delay because I couldn't quite get the delay up and running. I figured out a workaround at the last minute, but I didn't want to keep people waiting longer. But in any case, that allows me to take the magic of whatever amplifier I'm running through, come out of the speaker output, go into that box, and the important thing that I'm doing here as it relates to this world is I have an ISO cab over there. And basically, when you run an amp into a cabinet, the amplifier and the cabinet, they talk to each other. The cabinet has an impedance, and as that signal gets pushed this way, there's a reaction and a relationship between the speaker's reaction to the signal that's being sent to it and information coming back up to the amplifier. That means that the amplifier, the sound that it makes and the way it behaves, is reactive to the load that's on there, hence the concept of a reactive load. However, having a reactive load that is the actual cabinet that you would normally be playing into, or a very, very similar speaker in an ISO box is really important, because then the amps going, I'm seeing the normal cabinet I'm used to doing, and there are frequency shifts that happen around this. So one of the neat things about this box is, first of all, it's allowing me to load an IR of just an oversized rectifier 412 slant that's actually not on the back line right now, but the one that's right there is an oversized straight cabinet. And in turn, that is also going out kind of through a through output, if you will, to the ISO speaker cabinet there. So as much as I'm sending an IR into the computer, the amplifier is still actually seeing a cabinet. So I'm kind of getting the best of both worlds. All right. So my first of all, Chris, I always love your presence of questions. Braxel, good morning. I bet you've got a great question or two. Albert, hey, hang on a second. Let me get through to Chris here. Chris, should I have a dedicated computer for recording so no other programs interfere with the recording process? It's a really great question. First of all, I think this is a question that really kind of deserves something more like a little caffeine to really make us think this through a little bit better. So, raising them up, let me know what it is that you're drinking and where you're coming from. And by the way, good morning. This is my muscle milk and a double shot to get the blood pumping. So here's the deal. There are a number of things that you want to do in the computer world. Generally speaking, you want to be living in the Mac world. So that is to say, if your main computer is a traditional PC running Windows, the majority of everything that's done in the computer world as it relates to music is done on the Mac. And if there's a Windows version, it's being ported out there, which means it didn't organically start as a Windows build in the vast, vast majority of the cases. So it means that, you know, if everybody's going to California for the sunshine and you want to go someplace sunny, but you got a ticket to Alaska, you may not be having the experience that you want. That said, the other thing, and you really asked about this, is kind of what's happening is you're running multiple applications. When you're live streaming, just for piss and giggles, as a case in point, Microsoft Word, kind of this slightly innocent-looking application, is the kiss of death to live streams. So you got Word open, you shut it down. Doesn't seem to mess with Pro Tools. However, the reality is this computer has, I think it's got, let me just double check. When I bought this computer, it has 128 gigabytes of RAM, which is a profane amount of RAM. But because I do video editing and I do audio and I do live streaming, I wanted to get as much RAM as I could possibly have, because that's basically the headroom of how many different applications you can have running and the depth of field, if you will, of what you can do in those applications simultaneously. Because when you're shooting video, you are recording audio, you ideally have Photoshop open, you ideally have your video editing application open. So that is to say, if your workflow is more than just recording guitar, like because everybody's kind of shooting video and you want to have the ability to do a round trip, most people who shoot video that you see, you know, on the internet, they're doing it on their iPhone, which, you know, the iPhone lens and camera for video and audio and photos is phenomenal. But if you want to do something more high-tech, that involves a more sophisticated application to be able to do all that stuff in the box, if you will. So in that particular case, again, the majority of that stuff is designed for Mac. So I have one main computer to answer your question. I am infamous for having way too many tabs open because I find areas of interest on the internet, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to come back to that. And then I open up groups of tabs around Mesa Boogie amps and whatnot. So one of the things, just for piss and giggles, don't do what I do. When you're done with a tab, either bookmark it or close it. When you're done with a program, if you're not going to need to be in there, close it. That's just a general rule. That way, as you're recording, your computer is really just doing what it's intended to do. So getting back to the most important thing is, one, A newer computer is important. Why? An older computer is capable of running some of these applications, but you get to a certain point in the life cycle of a computer and you can no longer update the operating system. And what will begin to happen is not only will new plugins and new versions of the software you require or you want to use need the new operating system to work, but older versions of things that you have, when you go to reauthorize them or update them, you can't, because of the limitation of the age of your computer. That doesn't mean your computer needs to be brand spanking new. Generally speaking, if you're looking for a great time to buy a computer in Mac world, I've bought a number, and I'm 99% positive this computer was, of refurbished Macs directly from Mac at Christmas time, and have gotten some really savagely great deals. And I don't remember if Mac just discounts at Christmas, and I don't remember specifically if I bought this at Christmas because of a discount or because I got it to get it at the end of the year for the tax for that the year that it was just in the process of passing. However, in my opinion, the best deals that I found on a dependable computer that for the period of time during which there's a warranty, and of course it never breaks during that period, it breaks as soon as that's out. I actually have had really great luck with my Macs, but eventually things wear out. The point being is that I found with the refurbished Macs, and you can usually get them if you want to upgrade. The thing is, I use an iMac format, and getting in there and changing out the RAM is nearly impossible. You got to take off the screen. It's a giant drama. I've never bothered doing it. In the old days, they used to make it so you can open up a compartment on the back. I think they've changed that. I could be wrong, but as I recall, you used to be able to open up this little door on the back, and that's how you change out the RAM. But as I recall, on the newer ones, you have to do it through some crazy process. I could have that wrong, so please forgive. I'm going down the rabbit trail here a bit, but this is super, super important. It's a great question. So to get back to the short answer, you can run all your stuff on one computer so long as you have enough RAM and you're conscious about not having too many things open at the same time. Boy, but it's such a great subject. Okay, hang on. And I'm sure Sonia has great input here. Albert, there we go. Good morning, Albert, first of all. So I managed to get the guitar thing routed, and I've got a Pro Tools session routed. That I think if I do this, and I mute my mic. So I was so excited because everything was looking so good. And I was playing along because I do test audio and test video, and I'm looking so excited, and the backing track's playing and there's no lead guitar. I'm like, what the hey? And then I'm kind of working, trying to get stuff, and finally I was not able to get my guitar to have any delay, but if I want to spend some time playing with the track like this, turning my vocal mic off. That much I got. So that was kind of a big accomplishment. It was like watching the clock. Holy cow. Okay. So Sonia's, here we go. Recording acoustic guitar that is, hold on, wait, did I miss an earlier thing? Oh, yeah. Recording here just today. Problem sits in front of the mic. Hold on, wait. Okay, good. Okay, hold on. So, yes, recording acoustic guitars. Let's see here. Sonia, Chris, today's computers are fast enough to handle all your programs in parallel. Exception might be high volume I/O, like disk backups running in the background. The other thing you want to be conscious of is like this sort of stuff that, as Sonia pointed out, if you're running some sort of time, whatever the heck, that vault thing where it's doing the backups. I've forgotten about that. I don't do that. By the way, if you're looking for a generally phenomenal file management imprint of data on your machine, I'm a giant Dropbox fanatic. The most important thing about Dropbox, it allows you to have data in the cloud and data on your local machine. And as your local machine, like mine, always fighting for space, when I'm done with a project, I can take that information and I can make it offline only, I think is the term of it. So you basically right click on it. It allows you to basically, it has a kind of, if you will, a ghost image of the data where it was. So if you want to restore it and bring it back down from the cloud, you don't actually have to go hunting for it. Where it lived on your hard drive, it's just basically created an imprint of it. So you can right click on that and restore it from the cloud. I've only had corruption happen once in 10 plus years of using it, and it was very, very early on. It works really, really, really well. So to Sonia's point, there was a point where I had been Mac and decided to go Windows. And I was really excited about it. I used to spend a lot more time doing just design work. And Macromedia was making a big push into the Windows environment. However, and I'm not saying it doesn't work, because it clearly does. However, I find that companies like Universal Audio, for their plugins and all these things, generally speaking, stuff gets developed on Mac and ported out to Windows. The other bummer about Windows, and Windows is there's a lot of great things about it, and quite frankly, if your main computer is a Windows computer, you don't have to get rid of it. The idea is that the driver thing with Windows just drove me nuts, so to speak. However, absolutely workable. You are precisely correct. So there you go. And why is it shrinking down? I guess it now just does that every time it goes away. Is that the deal? All right. Good morning, John. Absolutely. All right. So this is an interesting thing. The comment, for those of you that are on mobile devices, that might be small. Besides the presence adjustment, does Cab Clone IR sound any different from the internal Cab Clone IR, say on the Badlander? It's a great question. Okay, number one, the length of the IRs that this will support is 100 milliseconds. And it's my understanding that the longer millisecond IRs, in fact, do sound better. I've never A-B'd them back and forth, so I cannot say one way or the other. I have a new device that is arriving on Monday from Two Notes, which is the Two Notes Captor X Plus. And it's their latest and greatest device. Now, I am, in particular, because I'm spending so much time with that and that and that, those are triple rectifiers, and they are 150 watts a piece. And the two-note stuff is only 100 watts, so it's not going to work with those amplifiers without risk of blowing it to smithereens. The great thing about this guy is it's rated at 150 watts. So the IRs are interchangeable between the two. My guess is, and I have a vague recollection, that basically this, with the exception, as you pointed out, of the presence control, and with the exception of the input and output controls, is what's mirrored inside, for example, our Badlanders. So that would mean that it is probably a 100 millisecond IR, but you can load. I think it will only play the first 100 milliseconds. I need to double check that. But the point being is you can obviously load third-party IRs in here. As I recall, hold on, it's in my notes. I can never remember whether it's 48 or 44.1. So I finally wrote it down. And let's see if it's actually going to come up in my notes here. And if it doesn't come up easily, then I thought I created a doc for this. In any case, the ability... all right, all iCloud. Notes. All right, it's not coming up easily. All right. With that said, the new Two Notes device, and as I understand, Two Notes was actually integral in the development of this particular box. There we go. We're back here with all of this stuff, and that's that. Let me see if there's one that comes up here. Just quickly, let me scroll and see if it comes up. And if it doesn't, we'll move on in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Well, okay, it's visible inside the manual. I don't know why it's not there. Okay, so the deal is, it's essentially the IR player is what's in there, as I understand, and it is, to my recollection, the best of my recollection, the IR player that's in there, which means there is a 100 millisecond limit, but it will load third-party IRs. And I want to say that I think it was 48K, but I could be wrong. So there you have it. So, but the thing is that the ability to be able to come out of the amp, and the great thing about the internal cab clone IRs is, if possible, using the actual speaker that's in the amp simultaneously means that the amp is actually behaving like it's seeing an actual speaker, or being able to use an ISO cab. And knowing how crafty you are, Albert, it would probably take you all of a hot second to actually build an ISO cab. I cannot suggest, for those of you that do home recording, the value of that. Let's see, if I mute my input here, you will hear. That's the sound of the sound escaping the ISO booth. This guy is kind of at the middle level of volume reduction, and the amp is scaldingly loud. So it's basically at 5 on master volume, which means it would be obscenely, wonderfully loud. And so the thing about using the ISO cab, again, and by the way, what I've got in there, that for those of you that use Vintage 30s or use the Black Shadow from Celestion, the Custom 90, there is a speaker from Celestion called a Redback. And one of the things that I did was I went out and looked at basically the response of the speaker and compared that between those three speakers, and the Redback is very, very close to both speakers, which means what the speaker is doing is what the amp is used to seeing, but because it's a 150 watt speaker, it can handle the triple rec on its own. And most of the time you're not like cranking the triple rec entirely, but what's neat, as one speaker, I can run pretty much any amplifier that's here into it. There is a 200 watt Marshall Major that's here. You've never really experienced loud until you've heard this amp. The triple rectifier is really loud. That amp is really, really, really loud. And the thing about it, where the triple rectifier has this oozing tightness in the bottom end with this beautiful kind of a rumble, that thing is shockingly clean, which means those high frequencies hit you like nothing else I've ever heard. And it's a really special amp. There's also a PV Mace, which is a 160 watt amp, 6L6s, kind of like the triple rec, but it's also a shockingly loud amp. Actually, one of my favorite gear stores, I went up and bought the cabinet for that at a church up near Sacramento. I love taking little, gear treks, and I got up there and I brought the Mace, the PV Mace, with it because I wanted to buy the matching cabinet. The cabinet is a 612 cabinet. This is 412. This is 612. And so it was actually in the sanctuary of the church, so I bring the amp. And I'm absolutely positive that nothing has been half as loud as I was in that sanctuary before or after. But the look on these guys' faces was hilarious in any case. All right. Hey, there we go. Hey. Oh, awesome. All right, Jim, first of all, great to see you. I'm going to come back and grab your question, Chris. I missed that. Hey, Doug, just bought a Marshall 62 reissue Bluesbreaker amp at GC, marked as excellent, shipped UPS, unboxed it, and had a dent on the top and right front edges. Played it, sounds phenomenal, called them on it, and they knocked off $500 price. would you return it? It's a great question. I would leave it on all day. I would tap the top of the amp, the side of the amp, and do all sorts of other things. Generally speaking, heat and time usually reveals if something's going to be a little bit strange. You also have 45 days to return it, and knocking off $500 off the price. The real question is, and this is one of the important things, sometimes we're like, you know what? I got this great price on this. Well, eventually, if you're going to ever go to sell that amplifier, does the damage exceed the discount? And if they're offering $500, because they don't want to ship that thing back, see if maybe they'll offer a little bit more. It's GC, they probably won't. They probably have some little number that comes out of the computer when they put in the price and the transaction and the damage thing. But they don't want to pay the shipping on the way back for that thing. So I would see if they'll, you can ask if they'll give you $750. It's not kind of, rolling over a barrel because you can. It's a matter of like, if you ever go to sell this thing, you're going to take a ding on that. And so that would be my consideration. That said, my buddy Paul, he sometimes hangs out here, Richard, he got that crazy Fender amplifier that's got the 310s. It's basically like a super reverb and a vibroverb. That's the Jack White amp. Crazy amp. And it got damaged in shipping, I think, from Guitar Center. Sound familiar? And, mind you, that's right. I had something that got shipped from Guitar Center, and it was the worst packing job ever. There are some really nice people that work at Guitar Center, and then there's some people that should never go near loading a box. We'll leave it there. The other thing that I would suggest, by the way, anybody, because I bought, that's not in frame, I bought a 100-watt Badlander from Guitar Center. Got a smoking price on it. And it arrived fine. There were no issues with it. But generally speaking, when you go to buy something, if you buy it online from a GC, you can always get a hold of the manager. And you can speak to the manager and say, hey, I ordered this piece of gear. Can you please make sure that somebody that has experience packaging the amplifiers is the one that puts this shipping together for me, please? And usually these managers really, really will do that. And also offers a level of accountability that if something goes wrong, you call back. His name is now Justin. Justin, hey, man, this is Doug. Remember we talked about that amp? It got destroyed in shipping. I thought you were going to put somebody good on it. And why don't you give me $750 back? So that way you're kind of doing that. So I would, kind of see, if you feel that the damage doesn't exceed 500 and you love the amp. And that's the thing. If it's everything that you want it to be and it's there and you're digging the vibe and you're just like, hey, I would roll with it. That's what I would do. So appreciate it. Okay. They do not send out that for free gear. Free gear, I'm going to answer this question because it's such a great question. There is let's say, let me keep it short, but for any of the folks that are out there that are in the demo world or thinking about being involved in the demo world, basically there are different types of budgets. And one of the things that I discovered many years ago was this concept of an extended loan. And somehow brands don't always account for the gear that goes out. And they can just go out and it seems like there's no accounting. Then there are brands like Mesa and Gibson where there's very strict accounting, there's budgeting, and a piece of gear can go out as a piece of gear that is on loan, and there's a specific time that gear is out, and then it goes back. Then there is gear that is budgeted within an artist budget that goes and stays. And so somewhere in the midst of all those paradigms is that reality. I've never, ever had a 1099 for gear that was sent to me as an artist that I needed to pay tax on. That said, I've had gear that I bought as an artist that I instantly pay tax on. Great question. Which On the flip side, though, all of that is now a write-off at the end. So, great question. All right, good, inexpensive attenuators. So, first of all, generally speaking, but not exclusively, um, inexpensive and attenuator are two words that don't go together. So, you spend a fair amount of coin on a really wonderful amplifier. You ideally want to make sure that whatever piece of gear you put between that amplifier and the speaker to tame the volume is a high quality piece of gear. I have a number of different devices here. I have the Waza Tube Amp Expander, which is great. They also make a smaller version of that now, and actually, that one is one of the ones that has a 4, 8, and 16 ohm selector, which is great. So as you're toggling between your different devices, there is also the two notes. Let me just double check this. Right. So the new two notes Captor X Plus is $600. But the thing about it is that, first of all, one of the downsides of the two notes line is that when you buy, and it's the same deal for the Mesa stuff. It's either an 8 ohm or a 16 ohm device. You can't go back and forth between the selection on those particular devices. I am fond of a number of the things about the two note stuff. And in particular, one of the reasons, I'm just going to say, I got artist pricing on this box. And I was hoping they would send one to me for free, but they didn't. And they came back with an offer that seemed really fair and equitable for everybody. I was like, I'm going for it. Because a really great reactive load box is an integral part of your rig. Now, the deal is, this guy, I absolutely love it. And like I said, the Tunis one only goes up to 100 watts, which with your blues breaker is going to be fine. The amount of triple rectifiers in the room here mean that box is not going to be my go-to device. This guy is going to be, because of its ability to step down the load, or I should say the volume. But what's neat about the two-note stuff is they've come out with their latest version of, I think it's Wall of Sound, but it may be their next gen stuff beyond it. But they have continuously evolved kind of how they deal with their IRs with something they call Dyne IRs, which are dynamic IRs, and they continue to get better at it, and they're exceptionally good. So the idea is we're not necessarily just looking at the device that's reducing the volume. The idea now. That said, the more important question is what's going on, Clean Tone? What's happening there? Oh, right. You showed up a couple of weeks ago. All right. So the deal is there are kind of two main categories that these are going to live. Let's talk about three. One, you've got an amp. It's just stupidly way too loud for your house. Category 1, Category 2. When you go to play with your band and you go to play that thing live, it's stupidly too loud for the venue, and the person at the club is like, you got to bring that down. But to get the amp in a non-master volume amplifier, get it up in that sweet spot, you've really got to kind of push the amplifier. So now you're fighting tone versus volume, which is where one of these devices becomes so valuable in those two scenarios. The third one, and as I recall, you already are recording, the third one is how you're getting out of that device into your DAW. And that's where this two-notes device, I'm really excited about it because it offers yet another solution for doing that. I will say one of the great things about the Roland stuff, or it's actually a Boss Waza Tube Amp Expander, is it's got a bunch of effects built into it. The two-note stuff has some reverb in it, but with the Waza Tube Amp Expander, you get a nice, healthy selection of stuff, including an STE 3000, which is a really iconic delay that Roland made, and Steve Vai used to use them. and they have a very unique sound. I remember being at a NAMM show, and you could hear it. Each delay kind of has its own unique sonic character. I'm like, or maybe it was a demo of the SDE 3000. I happened to be at the NAMM show, and I'm like, or of the Wazoo Tube X, and I was like, that's an SDE 3000, and you can just hear it. It's got a particular type of ping with the delay. Same with the Deluxe Memory Man. There's kind of a ping that happens with that first transient of the delay, where you kind of go, oh, it's that signature. Same thing for the softness of that. For example, with an Echoplex, there's a particular sound when you hear that delay come back. What's important about it is the way after you hit your main note. Hold on, I'm off, and I need to be on here. When you hit that note, and each successive note that you play, the way the delays sit around that, if you will, I like to say kind of cloak the note. If they're too pokey, they kind of get in the way of each next transient. But if they don't have enough transient response, sometimes to get it loud enough, you now just have a little bit too much wash in the background. Sometimes you want wash, sometimes you don't. All that to say, probably could ask, hey, Jim, where the hell did my comments go? There we go. Are you needing to get into the DAW with this thing? But it's a really great question. Good morning, Eric. How you doing? Hello, hello, hello. Clean tone once again. I love that, by the way. Clean tone. Chris, hard to see on my phone, but what's the item next to the... So this is the magic sauce. So this, when I put my hair back now, this is the Jimmy clip. And what's neat about this is that without said item, you get these sympathetic vibrations here. And now, versus... And what happens when you're playing with a super high gain tone and you kind of do something like, and you hear, no, it's annoying. So my buddy Jimmy made these, and they're great. And I find that it seems to work a little bit better when I put it at an angle like that. So... And I realize I've got some bleed through because it's coming through the mic there. And any case, Sonia on the fly. Come on. Why am I not surprised? Sonia, do you have a Jimmy clip? Sonny, what's happening, my man? Great to see you. Hello, hello, hello. Always a pleasure. Okay, I would take it back because they lied or they don't care about how it was shipped. Well, that's a different question about Guitar Center. I've never heard you mention Dr. Z, so have you ever tried one out? So I have a gear lending buddy, and I call him Rain Man. His name is Steve Rainaldi, and a number of the amps on the back line belong to him, and he's just a wonderful soul. And there is a Z-Wreck that we were talking about last night. There was a train wreck that I borrowed from Art Thompson that had been sent to Art. Used to work at Guitar Player, and then the train wreck, or sorry, the Dr. Z guy sent that to me, and it was a fabulous amp. And so their amps are great. And in particular, the thing about the Z-Wreck is it's a train wreck that was designed by this guy, Ken Fisher, who passed away, who was the train wreck guy. And it's supposed to be a mother load of an amplifier. So we were talking about that particular amplifier and last night. Funny thing. So they make fabulous amps. But I haven't spent an awful lot of time playing them, but was very impressed with the one that was here for a minute. Great amps. Just bought a JCM 2000 100-watt TSL. Needed. Oh, awesome, awesome, awesome. So, okay, then there's another piece of this. Awesome. Generally speaking, marshals want to see a 16 ohm load. So if, for example, you're stepping into the 2-notes world, you're going to want to get the 16 ohm version of that. Now there are, okay, so let's take a step back here and talk about where volume exists. So if we break, the amp into the preamp section and the power amp section, the power amp is where the volume happens. Now, for those of us that have a kind of a more modern high gain sound, that's happening in the preamp section. However, one of the things about amps like the Badlander is, as much as it's got all the preamp gain that you would want, one of the great things about that particular amplifier is that you start turning that power amp up and you get this power amp overdrive. So the difference between distortion and overdrive, I like to say, if you think about a distortion pedal and overdrive pedal, a distortion pedal is that kind of buzzy sound that you hear from the preamp section, where that warm kind of, if you think about Bad Company or classic rock or Eric Clapton's Woman Tone, that happens when you take, especially in the Clapton era, a non-master volume amplifier and just turn that up. And the magic of that is it's a particular... So I'm going to back off my volume control. And I'm going to kind of imitate... Let me mute the volume here. So that type of a vibe, the magic is usually happening either from turning your volume down or turning the power up section of the amplifier up. And for that particular Marshall, there are two places you can potentially live. If you really, really, really love the classic rock vibe, you turn the gain down and you turn the master volume up, and you let that power amp do what that power amp really loves to do, which is play loud and start to break up. But that you're going to get volume in the process of doing that. If you're primarily cranking up the preamp gain and not playing stupidly loud, you're generally not getting into the area where you're making the power amp work super hard. So there are a couple of solutions for that. All my pedals have been organized, but there's a certain category of devices that are not organized. So Daniel from the Gig Rig has a device that may be perfect for you. And basically, it is a passive attenuator that you put in the effects loop. And all it does, it has an off position, and it's got two different selections for volume controls where you can basically turn down the amplifier from within the effects loop. It's a phenomenal device. For those of us that use the distortion primarily created from the preamp section, you put this little magic little box in the loop, and it's I believe it's MIDI compliant. It also has a foot switch, so you can then in turn connect it to some sort of box like the PBC6X that I've got over there, so you can, on a preset by preset basis, get it to kind of work remotely. But again, it's got a foot switch that you can use with it to work with, or a foot switch jack, and I'm pretty sure it came with a foot switch as well. Let me just take a wander off camera real quick. Let me see if I can find it, because this thing's actually it's actually exceedingly cool. It's going to be in one of two places that I'm either going to find it or sprinting across. Not going to find it. But this thing is so flipping cool. Come on. Come on. I wonder what it'd be like to come onto a live stream and the guy's not actually there. It's just like, what in the world is going on? That is to say, you can't see him, but you just hear this strange voice talking. All right. I see a box. Could that be the right box? That is the million-dollar question. Maybe. Maybe. Here we go. Awesome. We get pay dirt. So there was a gig that I had. Actually, I had the privilege of headlining the Baked Potato in Los Angeles. It was a really big deal to me because it's a really famous venue. Like all sorts of amazing people have played there. And it's a spot that I really like to play. But I really could have used... By the way, their packaging is so darn good. There's the 2-button foot switch, by the way, and they would have included a cable as well. And then there's this little thing that's printed on the box with thanks. Just like really, it makes it feel when you open the thing up, you kind of go, oh, they cared. So this is the device, and so these are passive volume controls. So literally it's 0. And again, I'm a label freak. So if I can print a label and put it on there so I can actually see what it does, in, out, and then FS is, of course, global for foot switch. But that allows me to, you know, when it's sitting on top of something and you're like, okay, what does what's connected where, or you're in a dark venue setting up. And generally, I'll put Velcro on anything, my favorite thing to do. And I'm sure it's actually not on the top of this rack. It is on the top of this one. I'll put it on top of speaker cabinets, on top of racks. I'll put a layer of Velcro so I can stick stuff to it. I'm kind of like, not because I'm like anal retentive about Velcro, but because there are times and places where you really want to be able to adhere something to something and you're like, I don't want it sliding off, or the kick drum starts, doing the kick drum thing and it slowly starts working its way off. You don't want to do that. So the great thing about this is it's basically, and you can select it, each one of the different sides from the front here. But it's passive attenuation. And that would probably be great with your Marshall, unless you're like, hey, I'm a vintage kind of classic rock guy. I've got the gain down at about 5 or 4, and I've got that power amp section all the flipping way up because I love that. And if that's you, that is not the right solution. But I would say for the majority of people, this is probably a really great way to go. Now, the downside is that if you're like, well, I like a fair amount of preamp distortion, but I like to get that power amp up and running, that's not the way to go. So I was playing at the Baked Potato, and the drummer was not only super dynamic, he didn't play super loud. And so there were times we would get really quiet, and I found myself needing more gain at really quiet volumes than I was able to get to with the volume control. And I was thinking, oh, I could have used this. It would have just been perfect. And that's where it's really nice, is that on the gig, you can just kind of literally just kind of go, okay, there's at 10. You just dial the amp back just about to there. I correct myself. This is not MIDI, but because, oh, no, there it is. It is MIDI. Daniel is just a genius, and also knows the guy from That Pedal Show. He's also a really, really nice guy, which is always a huge plus. Okay. Yes. So here's the thing about attenuators. I think that there is an evolution of technology, and this is not a new box. So I'm going to say two things that are slightly contradictory. One is, generally, one of the reasons I got excited about this new 2 Notes box is that it's got their latest Dyne IR technology. So one of the things that's been happening here, I spent a profane amount of money over the past month and a half on studio gear and training, because I'm really trying to up my game as I'm trying to reinvent some of the things about what I do in the demo world as I'm kind of doing this quote unquote rectifier project. But it also means that I really want to share this stuff, and so what I'm also excited is to talk about is, sharing how this impacts how it can help you. And I'm learning a lot of things about getting guitar into the box, and also just once once it's there. So there's another piece of gear that's going to show up next week that is a 6-band parametric EQ. And the thing about these amps, and I haven't tested on this one, but my guess is I already know the answer. There's two main channels: a red channel, which is this guy, which is kind of the famous kind of high again. And I know it's up over here. So, but what's neat about these amps is that, you can literally... I can go from that extreme of... And if I lighten up on the pick... I shouldn't have the mic up. All right, but... So there's just lots of different tones there, and it's very responsive to the right hand. And I've got a fair amount of gain there. So the managing and manipulating all that is a thing. However, you get over to the orange channel, and there's a where that's tight, especially the 6th fret. For whatever reason, that seems to be the thing. That there's a guy. All right. So this is the important thing. So for any of you that do recording, there is a technique called. Well, first of all, there is the idea. You start palm muting. And sometimes you've got a mic in front of the amp, all you'll hear is... So the idea of being able to identify where those frequencies are is a big help. So generally, you set a parametric EQ, potentially in your DAW or whatever, and then you create a spike with a very narrow Q, wide Q, narrow Q, and then you sweep it until... it really goes from... it's extra loud. Then what you do, instead of boosting it, you cut it. The challenge is that it has a tendency to take out some of the... when you're not down here, what made that kind of get narrow and not go flubby takes away... some of the sweetness of those notes. So that kind of constant EQ is a problem. So there is a process that a guy named Andy Sneap is best known for, where you're basically using a combination of a compressor, and on the compressor there's something that you can have called a side chain. That's where this little bit of magic comes in. And so basically what you do is you run the compressor, and then in the loop of the compressor you run an EQ. And what you do is you boost the frequencies that you want to remove, and when the compressor sees those frequencies in the sidechain and the input program material coming into the compressor, and those particular frequencies are active or hyperactive, it compresses around those frequencies. It's a really cool thing. I actually kind of stumbled upon it out of pure desperation, and I say this, and this is why I'm sharing it with you, where you're like, everything's great until I go to palm mute, everything goes boo, 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 boo. So what happened was I used to have an old, and I thought I might have told this story a couple of weeks ago, but here we go again. Had a reel-to-reel tape deck at the old teaching studio. And I was recording, and I set up the mic, and I was like, got the palm muting thing, and I'm like, it's exploding every time I do it. So I was like, I've got to figure out a way to solve this. So I kind of looked at the gear. And I was like, well, what if I ran that EQ in the compressor? So I did the Andy Sneap thing before the internet was invented, at least as we know it, just out of sheer desperation. And I'm sure Andy Sneap did the same thing. I'm not saying it was a stroke of genius, it was a stroke of desperation. However, basically, that's what generally these days is referred to as Christian Kola, the guy that I'm studying with online. He would describe that as dynamic EQ. And it's more commonly known as multi-band compression, where quite often there'll be a couple of different bands that are a little hyperactive. And it's a really, really cool thing. There's a great training that he does on using it across different frequencies. For example, when you're palm muting, you have a tendency to get this increased that sometimes creates, as he would put, and I love his language, too much energy in the mix. He describes things in such a way that you kind of go, oh, that it doesn't say, oh, it's too much bass, it's too much energy. You go, got it. If there's too much energy happening in one part, it's a distraction sonically from everything else, the bigger picture, right? So the idea is to reduce that energy, but one of the other things he talked about was like, it's also nice when that happens to be able to increase just a little tiny bit of the attack of the right hand. So you hear a little bit more of the transient of the happening. So what you can do inside these fancy pants plugins is you can actually set the trigger frequency not to be the frequency that you're actually trying to get rid of or add, but you can set it somewhere else and go, okay, when we have, let me rephrase, you can make it such that the source that triggers that compression is the one you're trying to get away or add, or you can have it trigger and add at other frequencies. And the end result is you can get it to pull some of the woof out of your palm muting, but at the same time, you can also get it to boost a little bit of the attack, so you get a little less energy out of the bottom end, but you just get a little bit more definition that normally when you're doing the palm muting thing, it's nice to have just that little extra snap on the top. Really, really crafty stuff. A little down in the weeds, but when you're really trying to do cool things, this is where it happens. Another place, and I have not yet experimented with this, but just throwing it out there, and this actually wasn't in one of Christian's videos, but it's talking about another place that you can potentially use the side chain compression is on the bass and the kick drum. And the idea is when in the mix, the kick drum's going kick, 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 kick. Ideally, what starts to happen is, oh, somebody loved that. Awesome. Thank you, whoever that was. You start to get this process of masking where things are living around some of the same frequencies. And the idea is that by saying, all right, bass player, you and generally speaking, the kick drum, the body 60 hertz ish, and my sweet spot, if you're looking for a place to just kind of give a little bit of extra love and life to the bass, that's about 80 hertz. If I'm looking for like, oh, I just want I want to feel and hear the bass a little bit more in the mix. 80 hertz seems to be that, for me, that magic spot that's there. Now, I found there is a chart that is not being friendly right now. That's not it. Let me see if I can find it easily because I want to share it since I'm mentioning it. But all right, if it's not going to come up easily. But it is a frequency chart that walks you through all the different frequencies for the different notes that you would play. And the value of that is it really allows you to kind of go, oh, that's where that note actually is. And so the thing is, you kind of think about the different notes of the bass. They're not all living at 80 hertz. But there's something about the body of where the bass lives. It's a nice spot to just kind of go, let's push the bass forward there. It's a really sweet spot. However, 80 hertz and 60 hertz are close enough to each other that as the bass is playing, especially on a 5-string, being able to compress the bass just a little bit when the kick drum hits means it just pulls out just a little bit so you really hear the bass drum. Because one of the challenges, and I've certainly discovered this as of late, when you're working with different drum kits, the sound of this amplifier, one of the drum libraries that I bought where I play guitar and where the snare drum lives, they don't work super well together. I'm like, man, I love the library. I love the sounds. I love the MIDI patterns that came with it. But I'm inclined increasingly to probably not use it a lot. But it was a really valuable learning experience because I'm like, okay, the snare is a little bit lower. Like this little bit here, this is Superior Drummer. And this snare drum is one that I use a lot. So I am a snare drum fanatic. I love some ring to a snare drum, but the great thing about that particular snare drum is it sits well with the way I set amps and play guitars and play bass. And if you think about your average album, much of the time the drummer's not changing out snare drums the entire time, so it kind of creates a thematic thing. However, in the studio, as you're kind of using digital drums, if you kind of use the same snare drum over and over, it either creates continuity or is opening the door to boredom. The interesting thing is it was a snare drum that I tired of that, but in spending the time with this other plugin, I kind of came back to it. I'm like, oh, I love this. So the snare drum and the kick drum are super, super important. So let me pull up that thing again, and let me see if I can solo the kick drum in here. There is L kick drum, and there is solo. Muting the mic. Kick and snare. And that was adding the ambience of the room. Now, even though I didn't bring up the hi-hat's in the room there. And if you think about your average snare drum mic, it has a tendency to pick up some of the hi-hat in the process of doing that. The other thing is if you've got a hi-hat mic, quite often it's picking up some of the snare in the process of doing that. But the point being is the kick drum, it has a fair amount of energy in the mix. So if you're not careful, and for the more sort of vintage sorts of sounds that I go for some of the stuff, I've been doing this thing. Where I've been kind of playing this kind of thing, I guess. I got the mic up here, but the point being is that kind of, and I'm you know, this is different than. Oh, and, no, I'm not in drop. Where you're kind of moving that thing around, where this is. get the point. But in so doing, it really requires a slightly more vintagey type of a thing, and that's kind of one of the things that I love about the orange channel on these amps. However, there is a frequency. Didn't quite finish telling the story about the dynamic EQ. They're right around B flat, and I'm not on the orange channel. I'm on the red channel. There is a that happens on these older rectifiers. There's really kind of and to pull it out, you lose this. So that's where the ability to kind of start doing some dynamic EQing really helps a lot, rather than just pulling that frequency. So the ability to manipulate all this stuff is really cool. So I've got this. I think it's a 6-band. It's a symmetric. It's not new, but it's basically a piece of rack gear. So I'm going to be trying it with the different boogies, and hopefully it's going to work to do what I want to do. The Furman, which is kind of the PQ3. So what did you order? But basically, you would know that if you're a Dimebag fan. Chris, I know you recognize that. But that was a Dimebag EQ. But each of the 3 different bands of parametric EQ are different frequencies. This particular one, you actually have multiples of the same. I should say their frequency ranges for each of these 3 EQs. That there's a little bit of overlap, but this particular one that's coming has multiples of the same one, so you can really get in. It's like, all right, there's this frequency, and then there's this other one that's really close to it, and the ability to get in and hit a couple of different frequencies. Because the unfortunate thing about the older rectifiers, the new ones, they really figure that piece out. There's a guy named John Marshall that is the guy that did that 3-channel rectifier. He did both sets of the 3-channel dual and triple rectifiers. He's the guy that did the Badlanders, Albert. And he's also the guy that did the new rectifiers, like the new triple rec and the new dual rec. They're phenomenal amps. And in the orange channel, they tightened up the thing that was happening there. And so the neat thing is they gathered kind of all these different old rectifiers and kind of went and found the best qualities, but also addressed some of the things that historically were like clean channel. And, the thing is that if you kind of finagle the clean channel enough, no, I'm not going to be able to get to that easily. You can get someplace with it. But actually, you can get a phenomenal clean sound. But you have to turn the master volume way up. And it's kind of at the expense of not having a second gain channel. And the great thing about the orange channel in these amplifiers is there's some really great classic rock tones. However, you get down here and start palm muting, there's a woofiness. So it's a thing. All right, let me jump back into comments here. I went way down the rabbit trail, but clean tone, I hope that was a help. Tony, we've been friends a long time, and just say your vast, expansive knowledge on the subject of guitars and equipment blows my mind. Doug, you are such a treasure to all of us. Andy, thank you so much. First of all, appreciated. You and I have been, we've been side by side, shoulder to shoulder for all these decades. So, don't put paint in my hands because I don't know what I would do. So you have a gift around what you do in making cars look the bomb, and have been doing that and studying that, and the guitar, not one at the expense of the other. For me, I've kind of fallen down the rabbit trail with gear. And so having the privilege of being able to share that with you is one of my favorite things. And being appreciated is also awesome. So thank you. All right. Good morning, Speedwagoner. Just use a Groove Gear fret wrap for the acoustic guitar for that. Probably a great idea. So for those of you who don't know, you'll see some of the tapping folks, they'll have a little Groove Gear thing that they'll bring over the top here also when they go to tap, so the open strings don't ring when they're doing some kind of crazy tapping. So I'm going to do this and do that. I call it the guitar bra. I hope I haven't offended anybody. I don't use stuff like that other than this but on the far side of the thing. The other thing is there is one guitar around here that sometimes this area can also become active. So there are times that I'll put one of these guys over here as well. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure I pulled a guitar. I played Easter Sunday service last week at a local church. They are kind enough to hire me, and I think they like me, so I've been back a couple of times. But the point being is that it's actually really funny. During the sound check, they couldn't find my channel, so like, hey, Doug, go ahead and play it. I'm like, okay. And so it's like 5 minutes of mad shredding while they're trying to figure out exactly how to patch me into the in-ears. Different story. But the point being is I pulled one of the guitars out of a gig bag, and it had this placed here. I think it was on a Bigsby on a guitar that had a kind of a longer throw between the bridge and the end of the Bigsby, and that can kind of get chimey as well in the way that this area, in case you're coming in new, that stuff you don't want again when you're kind of going. I wonder if I can get it to jangle. There you go. You can hear that. It's not super loud. That. Gone. And in a recording, because it only does it on the breaks, right? So you're double trying guitars that drive you out of your mind. You're like, what is that sound? Holy cow! And and sometimes that can happen down here, but most of the time it doesn't. Okay, all right, all right. Hold on a second. Let me get caught up here. Thanks for that, Sonia. I use a hair tie to mute the headstock string. That's a great idea. Gosh darn it. Will you fit? I'm going to detune my guitar in the process of doing this. Great idea. Get on there. Get on there, little doggy. All right, so now I've loosened this thing up, but I could kind of tie a knot or something. Wrap it around tuner there. Hey! Problem solved. Very crafty there. I like that. So you can just kind of leave that dangly there as long as it doesn't come right here. But you could actually, kind of also kind of use it. You could also use it for this thing, the tappy thing. Oh, that's convenient. So it's kind of right now, you probably can't see it, but it's just nestled on the fret side of the nut. Oh, that didn't do anything. Hold on. No, I was hoping it was going to provide a little bit of a mute for me. No. All right. In any case, great idea. I like that. Thank you for that. That's a step. That's a step ahead of me. All right, there we go. Come on, let's do that. I don't know why this display's so small. Okay, so let me get you that link there. Hang on a second. Come on. Let's see. All right. Okay. Here we go. Good. Okay. Depending on what platform you're on, this will or won't come through. But it's literally a matter of going to thegigrig.com/underliner. So it's called the underliner, and it's flippin' killer. At the Source Studios. No, but hey, how you doing? Nice to meet you. I love your icon there. Pleasure. All right, hang on. I got to jump back up to the top and get caught up. Holy cow, I'm way behind here. Hold on a second. All right, there we go. All right. So, yes, clean tone. That would be a great... And the great thing about that is because it's not interrupting... There's a video that needs to be made. Okay. It's not interrupting the path between the output of the amplifier and the speaker cabinet. Which means that it's basically not only passive, you're not doing anything dangerous. When I was touring with Michael Schenker, one of the things that he would do was in the loop, he would run right. Okay. we're going to talk for a moment about the crazy thing about the Rev G amplifiers is that they have something that's really, really, really clever, which is a parallel effects loop. And the Marshall JVMs, there's one over there, has a parallel effects loop. And the great thing about that, it means that, say, for example, you got some piece of gear, it's a delay. The parallel effects loop allows you to run just the pure wet signal out of the delay and blend that in the effects loop. And so when I saw Michael Schenker, one of the things that he did was he had the delay and a volume control. So he was running the boss delay in the loop of the Marshall, and he was using a volume control to blend in how much delay he had. I thought, oh, and he's basically, Sonia is the proud parent. Hang on a second. I want to put Sonia here. You're up here. No, you're not up here. Where the heck is it? Where is my fulcrum? Give it up. All right, the fulcrum has gone into hiding. Like I said, there's certain types of devices that everything is organized, and then the other parts of this are not. So Sonia has made this lovely dual axis expression pedal. What the hey? Come on. Oh, there it is. There it is. Seek and ye shall receive. Hang on. So this is a really groovy device. And this would be, actually, that would be a perfect place for it. So the deal is, Gear Garage indeed. So when using this particular device in the effects loop, for whatever reason, in the JVM, if I weren't running it 100% wet, I could actually hear some latency between the direct signal of the amplifier and the clean signal or the unaffected signal coming through this box. And it was just one of those things, every so often you hear something like, am I hearing what I think I'm hearing? And so the deal is, I think it's probably in here there's just a little bit of latency inside the unit by the time you go in and you go out. Unless you're separating between the outputs, your affected signal, which I don't know actually if you can do. So the point being is when using, this is one of my favorite delays. I love the fact that it's got knobs. So like you can adjust it, you know, if you want to have a little bit of modulation, you bring the modulation, the depth or the rate, you can just get to it from the top of the pedal. It's basically a stereo delay, so you can just adjust the delay times and the feedback for the different delays. You can adjust the mix. But the point being is that on that particular delay in the JVM, there was this, you heard this little bit of offset of the direct sound of the amplifier and the direct sound coming through the pedal. So in that particular instance, you take that guy, you run it 100% wet, and you just blend it in. It's the equivalent of an aux bus inside your audio thing. And that's the perfect sort of place where, you know, this has the ability to have an expression pedal to control the amount of delay. So rather than using a volume pedal, you use the expression pedal there. And because this is a dual axis expression pedal, I literally have a harness that I bought off of Amazon with two cables that I kind of have tethered together that allow you to just kind of plug into the two different jacks here. So the neat thing about this is it just works so well. And what's neat is that so long as it's Sonia, have you ever had any ground loop issues by using something that was that were potentially plugged in different places? Generally, you're going to have that loop, that ground loop anywhere, but I'm kind of curious. It's one of the things that sometimes can happen when you're connecting things that are plugged into different sources, where that can happen. I'm just kind of curious. No fault of this device, but the idea. So, say for example, you're controlling something that's down on your pedal board, right? And quite often you're at the lip of the stage, and whatever power is there is whatever power is there. The amp's on the back line. Whatever power is there is whatever power is there. Most of the time, those should be all in the same electrical truck. but every so often they're not. And so you can have things like they will be on certain older amps, like this one should have it, I think. No, that's Rev F or earlier. There's a ground switch you got on the front of the JC120 where it'll flip the polarity. And so one of the things that I always do, and you might want to try this, by the way, if you ever need to sing, basically take your guitar, turn the volume off, and bring it up to the microphone stand. And if you see a spark arc between your guitar and the microphone, which would normally happen between your mouth, then you potentially try, if you have the ability to flip the polarity on the amp, you do that. And it will save you a nice little shock to the lip. That happens about once, and you kind of go, there's got to be a smarter way to do this. I'm like, the guitar. So, because again, the reason happens, you're holding the guitar, and then you step up to the mic, and the ground arcs from the microphone to your lip. It is not a pleasant feeling. All right, so you got that link, Jim. So here's the thing. I'm slightly conflicted about the Cab Clone IR. In that, I use it every day. I think it's great. I think it's particularly great for the Mesa cabinets. And it was as I understand, that was partnered with, it's public information now, but it was built in conjunction with the folks at Two Notes. It's older technology, so I probably shouldn't be saying this, but at the same time, I want to be transparent about it. I love it. I use it every day, and this is an attenuator and as an IR loader for me has been the saving grace for so many different levels. First of all, the amp that left last night was a Rev G triple rec. That thing, obscenely loud, and so there's a certain point where the sheer volume, without stepping it down, and I'm in the middle of 5 positions here, that ISO cabinet, it's so loud in the ISO cabinet I can hear it competing with my speakers. So the ability to bring that down and again have it function as an attenuator, and if you need it to as a reactive load box or just as an attenuator, and not have it be a reactive load box, that is to say, because it's got a through out to the speaker, the amplifier is still seeing the speaker cabinet. It's a really robust unit. There is also the Fryette stuff that is really, really good. The power station, as I recall, has multiple impedance selections. So now, because your Blues Breaker does not have an effects loop, and it is a combo, you want to double check, which I'm fairly certain that as you kind of get in the back of the amplifier, almost undoubtedly, oh, hang on, Blues Breaker combo. Give me a moment. I do not have a Blues Breaker combo. Images. How about the back? There's the top. What we're wanting to see here is what we can't see. Okay. All right, Jim. So the deal is, hang on a second. That is not a cheap amplifier. I played one of these. No, I do not want to sign up for your email list. Thank you. Open image in new tab. Okay. And let's see if I can do what I want to try and do here. You gonna let me drag and drop an image? There we go. Hey, that was kind of fancy. All right, so what you can't see here, Jim, is what I will anticipate is if you take that back panel off there, and you probably can't see me mousing around back here, but if you take the back panel off, in theory, there is a speaker jack that is connecting those 2 speakers. My guess is that may not have a big guess. Hold on. Those should be 16 ohms. Yeah, they are. My guess is, well, it's, I don't know what load this thing's running at. Okay. So my guess is if you take that back panel off, hang on, let me see if I can find a shot of one. Blues Breaker combo with back panel off. You never know. I'm seeing gut shots, but that's not what I want. So chances are it's really just like a head that's been stuck into a combo shell. And in theory, there will be some sort of array inside there through which what my guess is those two speakers are plugged into a single output, single jack, but I don't know. And again, the way to find out would be to pull the back of that puppy off, and that's going to lie. So that is to say, you know, this type of a deal where you're kind of seeing, right, that says foot switch, but where your speaker output is there-ish, right? So there in theory is going to be some sort of array there where there's my guess is going to be those two speakers are going to come together with a common plug, and that's going to plug in there. You want to double check what that impedance of that is running at. But the ability to then have a cable that is a I can't get to it. So the one that's the ISO cab that I'm running, no. I have an ISO booth that I have a 412 cabinet in there that unfortunately doesn't do that great a job of isolating the sound. It bleeds more than the ISO cab. So great idea, not so great working. But there's a cable that comes from there that has got a male 1/4 inch connection. It's a speaker cable, so it's basically two wires, no shield, and then it terminates in a female 1/4 inch jack. Then in turn a male runs back into kind of back here. It's not actually connected at the moment, but if I were to connect it, that's how I'm kind of extending that run, because it's a little bit longer than my longest speaker cables will run. So the idea is you're going to want to get potentially a high quality. No, you're not going to need to do that. You're going to need to just get ideally you're going to want to take a single male and run that to the input of whatever attenuator you use, and in turn, if in fact those two speakers there are sharing a common plug, this is where you're going to potentially need to do that. Chances are that run from the speakers to where they plug in is short. And that's where potentially you're going to want to use a female 1/4 inch jack to a male 1/4 inch jack to plug that into the attenuator. And the load that those speakers are running at is gonna be imperative to the output on the amplifier and the setting for your reactive load box. So the other thing is I don't always believe the internet, but what is the impedance, standard impedance for a Blues Breaker combo? And by the way, just for pits and giggles, for those of you that are old-fashioned like me, let me get to here. There we go. In case you haven't seen this little... Oh, interesting. So it's all... Where's my AI tab going? There we go. So you select all, it launches this AI mode. There we go. All right. So typically, this uses two 12... Here we go. Two 12-inch speakers, obviously Celestion greenbacks or Alnico, which are wired in series to create a total of a 16 ohm load. And some of the old Celestions would run at 15 ohms. So that is what we're looking for. So, all right. Now here's kind of there's this thing here that I think you can see if you're on a mobile device you can't. Is it true? Blues breaker question. The original blues breakers had two 16 ohm speakers wired in parallel for an 8 ohm load. Normally, you would set the impedance selection for 8 ohms for this load. That is absolutely correct. Hang on, let me just read this just for a quick second. However, due to peculiarities of the transformers used in those amps, they work better with the impedance selector set at 16 ohms. The speakers in your amp are most likely wired. There's some longer thread here. All right, hold on. Okay, so the question is, I'll put this in, Jim. I've been having a good old time revisiting the male Bruce Baker album with my Lewis Electric 212 Blues Breaker. That's a killer amp. When I read the original model was wired for 16 ohms. I know Clapton amp was lost years ago, but was that model really 15/16 ohms? Sonically, guys, would you say 16 ohms? How would you say that 8 ohms differ from 16 ohms? Or how would you say it? And I've been using a 16 ohm Lewis Ferrari lately and loving 16 ohms. I'm going to send this link through. So it's here. I got to get to the right application. There we go. So jump on that if you're able to see that. All right, go there. There we go. It's just with that. Now, Jim. So there you go. So those are all really, really, really important things. Now, according to the Mesa Boogie guys, unless you go down to a really, 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 really low load, like a 2 ohm load, generally speaking, their thought is with Boogie gear at least, you always want to match your impedances, but it's not super bad until you get into a really, really low impedance load with the Boogie stuff. That's the Boogie gear. However, in my experience, I'm always super anal about matching whatever output I'm using. Now, traditionally on the back of a Marshall, there will be a 16 ohm. Actually, on the JVM, there is a 16 ohm, 2 8 ohms, and 1 4 ohm, as I recall. So if you're using a single Marshall 412 cabinet, that the vast majority of the time they do make 8 ohm cabinets, but the majority of the time the Marshall cabinets are running at 16 ohms. So if you're using one 16 ohm cabinet, you plug it into the 16 ohm cabinet or output. If you're using two 16 ohm cabinets, you plug it into the two 8 ohm outputs. And then if you got a 4 ohm cabinet, you run it into the 4 ohm output. So what's neat about the JVM, and I realize that's not your amplifier there, it is a really, really full-featured amplifier. And for what we were talking about here, with the ability to have that parallel effects loop, which again, you don't have an effects loop inside the device, that's one of the other things. Now, just for pits and giggles, the Waza tube amp expander is potentially a really, really good candidate. You just got to watch out for one thing. One of the things that people get in the habit of doing is just cranking the daylights out of their amp and leaving it on 10 and playing it like that. I have heard of some instances where with a Waza tube amp expander, people blowing up their tubes. So, which is not good. And the idea is that, yeah, it's nice to keep the amp running on, running super, super hot, but they weren't designed to be running on 10 day in, day out. And so just keep that in mind. And honestly, probably the power amp on 10 is not really where you want it. Somewhere between the 4 and the 6 place is where it kind of starts to get woolly and starts to be really that thing that you love. And somewhere between 6 or 8 and above, if you can stand it, it just, what it adds usually isn't better. It just adds mud. And I say that, it may not be as noticeable upon these strings, but you go to play on your lower strings and you're like, okay, it's just undefinable. Now, that said, kind of what I did before, and this is one of the things that I love about kind of more vintage style amplifiers, and I realize this isn't necessarily the most, I'm not going to change the settings. But that versus now, Jim, I'm just going to believe that you and I are similar enough in age that you have spent years playing on lots of amplifiers and know that you don't just always leave an amp or your volume control on 10. But I will say, my guess is that a disproportionate number of people that came up playing modelers have not spent, 6 is probably kind of the love zone, and loud. Now, one of the other things just to keep in mind for business and giggles is that because it's a combo, people have a tendency to let combos live on the ground. I generally, because of what I'm trying to do is capture sound and reproduce the sound that's being captured, have a tendency to elevate stuff. So if I have combos around here or open backy stuff, I'm going to do this without breaking anything. I will place them in such a way boom, such that it's at ear level. So that's the equivalent of your blues breaker combo. But there's a certain amount about, so if you think about you're standing in front of a Marshall stack, you're hearing that upper cabinet, right? And the guitar is hearing that. When the amp is lower, it's filling the room. It's potentially reflecting on whatever walls behind it. So that's part of the magic. I'm not saying necessarily elevate it. For what I do, I would elevate it. But, the majority of the people that have played your amp, keep it on the ground because it's flipping heavy and there is a particular vibe. However, when all of a sudden you go to stick a microphone in front of that amp, you're like, it's a lot brighter than I'm used to hearing it sound. It's because when you actually get on axis with that speaker, you're like, whoa. So there's that. So the ISO cab that I've got is this guy right here, and I'm trying to get caught up running back into the upper part of the chat there, but I saw that. So let me answer that with pleasure. Mojo Tone ISO cab. And it's really, 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 really good. So the one that I've got, there we go. So this is going to be a shot of those single speaker one. And thanks for jumping on the chat, by the way. So mine is, wait for it, almost twice as wide. But it is flipping great. It's one of the best products I've ever used. And I use it all day long. Now, one of the other nuanced things about this is when I really want to kind of start to settle out on a tone, quite frequently what I'll do is I'll pull everything out and plug into something like that. Or the other day, it's that cabinet there. And for those of you that kind of live in boogie world, one of the interesting things is that if you look at the Metallica guys, they don't play through oversized cabinets, which I thought was really fascinating because I was kind of, I live in kind of a boogie universe. And so as I've been out gathering different data about these different rectifiers and different things, I kind of noticed the Metallica cabinets, when using a cabinet, they're always playing with just traditional, I should say, the traditionals are the oversized, no, the traditionals are the regular. I always get these confused. Hold on, rectifier, recto, traditional. I should have this. Yeah, there's traditional and standard. Whatever reason, I can't keep that straight in my brain. I hope that's a help. They are phenomenal cabinets. Mine's got wheels on it so you can roll it around. And the unique thing about this particular one, it's not actively in their catalog or online, but the 212 version has two different inputs. So I've got two different red backs in there, obviously each rated 150 watts. So if I wanted to have two different triple rectifiers running at the same time. Holy cow, it's my voice. I'm able to do that, which is really cool. All right. All right, let me get caught up here because I missed a couple of people here. And gosh darn it, I hate doing that. All right, good. Just a little. No, actually, I don't like Mesa. I love Mesa. Short version is around 1980. I got my first Boogie, and I played them a lot for several years. And then I played different things, and then I had an experience. Actually, I can say this here. I can't say it in video. I was on stage playing with a couple really famous guitar players. It was really loud. It was a smaller venue. And I knew if anybody wasn't going to be heard in the PA, it was going to be yours truly. Not that I was sliding the sound guy. But so I had the amp at about 4. And I turned around like, hey, bring the master volume up to 6. It didn't get louder. It just got muddier. And I just kind of went, okay. And basically, it was playing at a reasonable volume. It was at stage volume. But when I needed that next bit louder, and I toured with tracks using that amp a bunch. Really outstanding amplifier. But to play at real concert volume with that thing, with a loud band, especially in a smaller setting, which is ironic, what happened with the power amp section when I went from 4 to 6, I'm just like, oh, I got mud. Well, here's the thing. In that particular setting, I was using a lot of preamp distortion. It's the sound. It's one of the things that amp does really, really well. It's got a beautiful lead tone. However, the thing that I love, for example, about a great Marshall non-master volume is that when you turn up the power amp section, everything that it does between 4 and 6 is magic. What it did for my use case, where I had the gain up super high, was not magic. And that was the beginning of the end of that amplifier. I'm like, okay, this isn't going to do what I needed to do in that particular use case. Now I play with less preamp distortion, and power amp overdrive is something I factor more into my sound. However, there's something about the Mesa world that there are so many different places that I can kind of find my... I'm not going to be able to necessarily get it here exactly. I'm going to have to mute my volume, and I have no... I don't have any reverb. You know what? Hang on. It's not going to be great, but I'm going to bring in this here, and I'm going to leave the mic up, and we're going to get some of this. Now I'm compensating because I know there's direct signal bleeding through, and that's either was a wash of just noise or because the room mic was up. There's a low rumble, I know. I get that you'll hear here, that you won't hear there. In any case, but that some of that ambient. But that kind of more vintagey vibe. I can find that on pretty much any Mesa, and that's one of the big parts of my sound. And so, literally being able to kind of go, oh, I can find that there. That's a really important thing. So, and it's a thing. All right. Hold on, just you. Okay, good. Oh, first of all, Nice to meet you and welcome aboard. Hi. Doug, pleasure to meet you. How come you have so much gear? It's my first time seeing you live. So, that's a really great question. So, one of the things is that as much as I can find kind of a particular vibe that I'm looking for on most of the boogie gear, each one of these amps has kind of got its own thing. And so, with that in mind, kind of getting to know each one of those pieces of gear, and because I spend so much time in the boogie universe, so I'm in the middle of production on this thing that's going to be called the Rectifier project, and it's basically documenting these old Mesa Boogie rectifiers as well as the new ones, and kind of walking through the lineage and kind of what's unique about, say, for example, this Rev G, and then it's kind of one of the later ones. It doesn't have an attached power cable. It's got a parallel effects loop, and it's got a board on the inside and taking gut shots and pulling the thing apart and all of these things in that whole universe. And the idea that one of the ways that you clean up the orange channel is by engaging the loop a little bit, and it'll pull a little bit of that woof there, even though I'm in the red channel. And it's not until you kind of live with the different pieces of gear that you really get to know it. So, and the other thing, I'm in the process of finishing 2 albums, a vocal album and an instrumental album. And sometimes the song calls for a particular sound that, kind of like you're working on a car and you need, I need that wrench. Having the ability to know the different amplifiers and be able to use them. It's a really great question. That each one of them has its own little unique magic. And every so often you just need that perfect wrench. It's a great question. Thanks for that. I am a Gibson and Mesa door start artist. I don't know how that happened. What is the gig rig thing called? The underliner? What are you? Yes, underliner. Flippin' really cool. Sonia, I bet you could make it in a heartbeat. But it's a really cool piece of gear, and it works really well. And I like I said, it's got Velcro here. One of those two heads, it's either the JP2C or the Mark 7. It's got Velcro on the top, so literally I can put it on there, and it ain't going nowhere. Because again, if you're up on the bandstand, the kick drum, boom, 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 or do. These little guys are start jiggling off. That's why you never put a drink on top of your amplifier. If you ever wonder why all those old Marshall cabinets got stains on top of them, now you know. Good morning, Nick. What's happening? Great to see you. Long time. Trying to remember your wife's name. Nope. In any case, please say hello. Great to see you, my friend. Welcome. Actually, you might have been here last week, actually. But I don't know if I gave you a salutation. Pleasure. Nick studied with me here in the Bay Area a couple of decades ago, and that's how it works. All right. Okay. Great question. Now I have a lesson that starts in 4 minutes. So that is a phenomenal question. So let me see if I can answer that. The short version. Only use passive. Okay. So the question is, hey, can you tell me more about passive and active pickups? I only use passive in the last 2 years I started playing. First of all, and by the way, and any of you that have further questions, please come back next week and I'll be happy to answer them. By the way, Miguel, always a pleasure. All right, so let me dig in. So the thing about the active pickups, and this guitar's got active pickups, and the sign of active pickups. Oh, my battery door is open. It's kind of like your fly being open. You're like, oh, don't let that happen. The idea is generally the active pickups have a more aggressive sort of a vibe to them. And traditionally I find that when I'm trying to do something that has a more modern sound to it, that is when I'm going to reach for those. However, if I want to go for something that's got a little bit more of a vintagey vibe, that is where I really love the sound of passive pickups. So I am, especially with the rectifiers and kind of working around these demos, I literally plugged in the amp. I didn't adjust anything this morning, so not necessarily the greatest tone ever. But the point being, if you listen to that particular rhythm sound compared to this one, I'm going to flip the cable around, but this is going to be a little awkward, like this, and right, you got so the active pickups have a tendency to be a little bit more scooped to a certain extent. They have a tendency to be a little bit more aggressive. At least these are the Fishman Fluence pickups, and it's kind of a custom set for these guitars. And the funny thing is, this is not a grossly expensive instrument. It's $1,000, $800, $600 on the used market, give or take, the condition. But it's outfitted with a bunch of really great features. It's 24 frets, got an ebony board. Pretty sure this one's an ebony board. Block inlays almost always indicate an ebony board. It's a really nicely made guitar. I played the snap out of it. I got a second one, but the pickups are one of my favorite things about it. And it also has the ability to kind of, with this little push-pull functionality, to kind of get into a more... What have I done over here? Oh, I'm on standby. That's what I've done. I'm back in drop tuning. Not necessarily the best demo. So let me just see if I can verbalize that. I've got a lesson that starts now. Generally, higher gain, and what this guitar does really well, and that the active pickups do, and there's a guitar over there with EMGs in there. The EMGs have a tendency to be a little bit muddier, but not necessarily in a bad way. If I'm looking for more of a vintagey or a classic rock sound, or a modern sound, but not super, super intense, that's when I have a tendency to reach for a traditional passive pickup. It's a great question. I've never had to answer kind of like when, where, and how. It's a great question. That said, when I want something that, especially if I'm going to tune down and just has a little bit more of a modern feel, that's when I'll reach for. And this guitar has really kind of been my go-to demo guitar. I'm super comfortable with it. I've got another one that was the first one that I bought, and I bought a second one. Generally, if I have a guitar that I'm going to potentially use on stage, I'll buy a second one that's a hot swappable backup. Then in case a string breaks or something goes wrong, these have batteries. Maybe, you forgot to change my battery. You're ready to go. All right, hey, I need to jump to my lesson. Great hanging out with you. I hope you had half as much fun as I did today. And thank you for hanging out with me on your Saturday. Have a great weekend. I look forward to seeing you next Saturday. Thanks again for making my day. Really appreciate it. Thank you.